just waiting a few minutes or a few seconds for it to go live. And it's almost done loading. All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Leveling Up Your Design Career with Side Projects with Femke, hosted by Design Buddies. I'm Grace. I founded Design Buddies back in April, and since then we've grown to over 22,000 buddies. We have a lot of events like this, a lot of free resources and wholesome community for y'all to hang out in. And we're mostly on Discord, but we're also on all our social media. And full-time, I'm a product designer at Electronic Arts. And I've actually found Femke's content while I was an intern at EA. And I was looking for how to write dev documentation to share my designs with developers. And I ran across her YouTube channel and her template. I thought it was so helpful that I watched like a bunch of her other videos and saw all the other Figma templates. And I found her podcast and have been really, really enjoying it. And I'm super excited to have Femke on today. And for our adventure for today, we'll have, I took all of your questions you kind of submitted on Luma and found the common ones. So we'll be going through this. So think of this like a coffee chat, but like an interactive coffee chat. So I'll be going over the questions you guys submitted. And during the event, if you have any questions that you want to ask live, make sure to ask it in Slido. This is because sometimes a Zoom chat can be really conversational. We don't want to miss any of your questions. And we also want you to upvote questions you really, really want to get asked. So make sure you submit all the questions you have live on Slido and upvote each other's questions, and I'll ask them as well. And at the end, at the last 2 minutes, I'll be taking a group photo and doing a wave for our Instagram story. And with that, let's get started. So Femke, we would love to know, like, basically introduce yourself. How did you get into product design and all the side projects you have been doing these days?
Yeah, thank you so much, Grace. I'm so happy to be here, and it's wonderful to see all of you joining today on a Wednesday afternoon or evening if you're in Europe. So thank you all for joining in and taking time out of your day. And shout out to Grace and the team at Design Buddies too for organizing this. Really appreciate this, and you've built such an amazing community that I'm so grateful to be a part of. So with regards to side projects, for those of you who maybe haven't heard of me or don't know much about me and what I do, I am a full-time product designer at Uber Eats. I've been working there for the last 4 years based in Toronto, Canada. And my side projects consist of a YouTube channel that I run and is fully kind of dedicated to teaching product design, user research, working within a product team. And I also have a podcast that I run with a friend of mine, Charlie Prangley, and that's called Design Life. And we talk about design side projects for motivated creators. It's been going for about 5 years, which is kind of crazy. That must be the longest running project I have ever had. And that's like weekly episodes. Those are my kind of two main side projects. And the podcast really started 5 years ago with Charlie, when her and I were having these kind of like long conversations about our careers and like trying to find our way as sort of early stage designers. And we had this moment where we were like, what if we recorded these, conversations that we're having and put it live in the form of a podcast, and maybe others can learn from what we're going through and have similar experiences. And so we kind of used it as an experiment to document our design journeys. And it's been going really well. And 5 years later, we're still doing it. And we claim to like not be experts, not have all of the answers to everything, but rather kind of just share our story, our challenges, what we're going through, what we're learning, in the hopes that that will help other people through the form of a podcast. So that was kind of the first side project that I really started doing consistently. And then after a few years of doing that, I was also kind of doing a little bit of blogging, like writing some articles, doing the email newsletter, sort of trying to teach a little bit of design, but was kind of struggling doing that in a purely written-based format. And so I thought, what if I started doing this a little bit more visually through video? And that's kind of how my YouTube channel started, where I wanted to keep teaching design and help early stage designers, students, or people early on in their career, or people transitioning career that are maybe later on, kind of get into design. And I felt like doing videos was a more sort of interactive visual medium for me to actually start teaching and showing and putting into practice some of the things that I wanted to share and teach. So that was about 2 years ago now that I started that YouTube channel. So yeah, both I think have been kind of come out of like wanting to teach and share my journey, share my experiences, and kind of give back to the design community.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, it's really great. Like just basically recording conversations and sharing them with the world and giving back to the whole design community. I see this asked pretty often in Slido. It's also one that was also submitted is how do you find balance with work and doing side projects? And just like we were talking about earlier, kind of like balancing work and hosting webinars like during work hours, and how do you like basically balance all that and communicate with your manager, your goals outside of work too?
Yeah, it can be challenging. And I don't want to speak about this from a place of like, I have it all figured out, because I don't. I still struggle with this sometimes. And some weeks I have so much going on, I realize like, oh, maybe I overcommitted a little bit and I need to dial back. Other weeks it's the opposite, where I like, don't have much going on in the form of side projects. So there's no real consistent balance when it comes to this. It's kind of like waves. And I think what I've learned over the years is the power in saying no to things and like being really selective about what I say yes to. Especially kind of at now the point that I'm at, where I get frequent kind of inbound requests of people wanting to collaborate or work with me in some way, or speak at their conference. And everything is always so exciting and such a great opportunity. But if I said yes to everything, I would have no more free time in my life, and absolutely no balance. So now I'm pretty selective about what I say yes to, so that I can respect my personal boundaries. So for me, it has to be something that kind of aligns with my values, my mission, what I want to give to the design community, and also has to be something that I'm really excited about, that I have that gut reaction of like, wow, this is a cool opportunity. If I find that I'm questioning it, or maybe the brand that reached out to me is something that I'm not familiar with and I have to go and research it, that's often sort of like a moment for me to say no, or a signal for me that I should be saying no. So yeah, I think being really selective about what excites you and what you want to say yes to is really important. And I think now with working from home a lot more, like work and personal and side project life all kind of bleeds and blends together. Like we're doing this live stream right now, which is for you during work hours, Grace. For me, it's like kind of at the end of my day. And so there is a little bit of that, like managing expectations with your manager or your place of work with regards to side projects. I actually frequently get asked, because I work at Uber, which is a pretty well-known big company, did I get my projects signed off by my manager, things like that. And the answer to that is yes. Essentially, when I joined Uber, I wrote a list of all of my projects and kind of got my manager at the time to sign off on those projects, being like, that's clearly owned by me, not by the company. So that, you kind of have clear guidelines there. And I'm just kind of regularly in touch with my manager about some of the side project work that I do, and making sure that, I'm not overstepping and can take time out of my day now and then to do events like this, which I love doing, and I love giving back to the design community.
Awesome. Thanks so much for taking your time to chat with us today. I
Yeah.
definitely agree. Saying no is so important, and really staying true to what gives you energy and what doesn't, and not being afraid to say no, because that's a skill that I'm learning as well. I get like sometimes up to hundreds of messages a day about just like work requests, coffee chat requests, pick my brain. And so
Yes.
I can relate a lot to that, and definitely went through a burnout of that. So definitely saying no, delegation, like Nabil said in the chat, super,
Yeah.
super important.
Yeah. One thing that I think this also, the YouTube channel has kind of helped me a little bit with this, is I often get frequent requests of like the pick your brain, or like I'm struggling with this, challenge that I'm having. over time, I've kind of identified the common requests that I get, and those kind of inspire the content that I create. So, for example, people who are like struggling with how do I prepare for my design job interview, or like how do I write case studies, or how do I work with my engineers and hand off my work effectively? I've turned those questions into videos on my YouTube channel. So now when I get people asking me those questions, I just kind of send them the link to the video, like, hey, I've done a whole video on this topic, go and check that out, watch it. If you still have questions after that, come back, let me know. I'm happy to walk through and sort of help you address the questions you have. So that's also for me been a good way to kind of manage all the requests I get and people who need help, is kind of turning some of that, or using that as inspiration to turn it into content.
Yeah, it's a good idea. That's something I've been also trying to do, like writing Medium articles or doing like group mentorship sessions with ADP lists and just sending people a link. And one thing I've been doing is I have like keyboard shortcuts on my phone that just like automatically sends a link, or like my like top 10 common responses. And that's also personally helped me a lot. If I'm a different computer, I have a Notion doc, everything too. So hopefully it helps anybody who has to like respond to a lot of the same messages over and over again.
Totally. Definitely helpful. I do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's also about like just seeing where you can automate things and getting things done.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely been helpful. Like, and I think you learn over time what those common requests are that come through. And I think something I've seen some chatter about on Twitter lately as well from some other sort of design leaders is kind of this like difficulty where there's a lot of people reaching out for help and you want to help everyone. But it's also really difficult to do that. When you're getting tens, 20s, sometimes 100 DMs a day from people who need that like one-on-one help, it can be really tricky as someone that's sort of working in the field of design to try and help everyone and on that one-on-one basis. So yeah, again, that's kind of why I've led towards creating content so I can help as many people as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's how I also kind of started creating content as well. My content kind of started with like lifestyle blogging, and then I went to design and saw that a lot of people were asking me how to become a designer without a design degree. So that's just like my number one most shared Medium article.
Yeah, amazing how that works.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I'm gonna ask another one of the top questions, the actually number one question in the chat we got on Slido. If you just joined, make sure you submit all your questions via Slido. Is what is your biggest piece of advice for junior designers who want to work on side projects to learn how to implement their design thinking skills? So this kind of lines with a common question that was asked in Luma, where people were thinking how to use side projects in a way that helps you like stand out amongst people and stand out in your interviews with hiring managers.
Yeah. I think side projects are a great opportunity for exploration. If you have a skill that you're interested in learning more about, or a technique that you really want to try, or something that you want to improve upon, side projects are great because it's completely sort of a self-directed project that you can build upon that skill or focus on a particular area of craft that you want to excel in. So I often recommend to kind of find a side project or think about a side project that kind of gives you that opportunity to work on that skill or that gap that you want to close. And then also think about like depending on what kind of side project you're thinking about doing, think about the kind of like industry that you're interested in, or like the type of content that you think would be valuable, or that you have interest in yourself. So I don't know, for example, if your side project is you want to create a mobile app about something, think about an area in your life that you're really interested in. Maybe it's the wellness space. Maybe you are a user of Headspace or an existing wellness app, and you notice things that you think could be done differently or done better, and that might inspire you to go and create your own kind of app within that space. Or if your side project is more content related, like for example, my podcast or my YouTube channel, think about like what kind of value you have to give and what you want to teach, and kind of give back to the community and who that audience and who that community is. I've talked to a lot of people who want to get started in creating content, but feel held back by the fact that they don't see themselves as an expert in that area. And I want to remind people that you don't have to be an expert in order to like teach and create content. That's really the premise of the podcast that I have. Like I mentioned, we're not experts. We're just documenting our journey along the way. Because I think it's important to remember that, you know something that the person next to you probably doesn't. So you don't have to be an expert, but as long as you have an interest or something interesting to share about a topic, that's enough to kind of teach and create something around that topic or that theme. So yeah, don't let that thought of having to be a perfectionist or having to be an expert kind of hold you back from getting started on those content related side projects.
Yeah, plus one to that. The hardest part just getting started, but once you do that, everything just becomes easier. So just remember that feeling of difficulty is only temporary. Once you get the ball rolling, it comes easier. And one
Yeah,
thing I kind of noticed people do is they just like post their learnings from like events on LinkedIn or on social media. So if you on the audience have something you want to take away or something to share from the event, definitely tag Femke, tag Design Buddies on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and we'll go repost it. So yeah, and another thing that people do is just like share their learnings, and then it helps them kind of become a thought leader. And they don't even have to be an expert. Like I create content, I only
totally.
have 6 months of full-time work experience, so and I'm a new grad, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And
And think of like all the students who have 0 months of work experience that you're able to like, teach and like help them, prepare for their first job. Like that's the point, right? Is like you're gonna have some experience that other people don't have. It doesn't matter what that level of experience is. It's just you have that experience. So you have something to share and something to teach.
yeah, I love that. Like, definitely everybody here has some experience that people don't have. And definitely go out there, give back to community and share them with people, share them with your friends. And the more you share them, people will think of you as like a thought leader. And then you'll get a lot of questions, and then you can like frame up content from there as well. I saw in the chat, someone said that their mentor told them to keep a journal of everything that comes. I feel like this is like a little known fact, but definitely have a place to like jot down your ideas, because Design Buddies was a shower thought of the name. Or like so after a shower, after you work out, after you run, after you sleep, definitely have a journal. Just write things down. You never know. Like you always forget these ideas afterwards too.
Yeah, almost all of my side projects start with some kind of like journaling or list making. Like before launching my YouTube channel, I wanted to make sure I had enough ideas for content before committing and like announcing this thing and then like having no ideas for it. So I still have the list somewhere today in an app where I just like wrote down as many ideas I could think of for videos just to check that like, okay, I actually do have some ideas and I do have, some content that I want to create. And so I 100% agree with like any ideas or things that come to mind, even if in the moment they don't feel so serious, writing them down can be really helpful and allow you to reflect back on it later.
Yeah, definitely. You don't remember how much times you forget things. Like when I didn't write ideas down, I ended up like regretting that afterwards. So write things
Yeah.
down. And another top question that was asked in the chat on Slido was sometimes like side projects are really good for exploring different fields and learning about different things. But I feel like as a designer, I feel like as a junior designer, it might be good to be more general, but sometimes having a lot of different variety of projects can seem like a lack of focus. So how would you
Mm-hmm.
recommend kind of showcasing kind of the balance between showcasing your skills and your passion as a designer, between showcasing your unique interests? Like someone might be a product designer but have a lot of experience doing illustration, but also want to show that, but also
Yeah.
not seem like they're all over the place with their interests and their career growth.
Yeah. This is really tricky to achieve, which is why I usually recommend kind of going deeper in one area. For me, that's product design. And that area manifests in a lot of different ways, like through videos, through audio podcasts, through my email newsletter I have. So generally, I try to recommend kind of picking one area and going deep in it. However, that said, you might not know what that area is yet, or you might have a lot of different ideas or different things that you're really interested in, like the illustration and the product design and maybe animation. I don't know. And so in that case, if you're in that spot, then I think it is, totally fine to explore a few different things and try a few different things and kind of see what sticks and what you enjoy doing most. Like if maybe you sign up to do like some 30-day illustration challenge or something. And if you find that like you're dreading it and like not looking forward to the next day and like, oh, now I need to draw the letter H and I'm really not looking forward to it, maybe that's a sign that that's not the right project for you to pursue or not the right area for you to kind of turn in to this big sort of public side project. So kind of just try a few different things and pay attention to the sort of signals in your mind that are telling you that maybe this isn't the right area or isn't the right place for me to focus on right now. And I feel like when it comes to like your portfolio and applying for jobs and things like that, in my experience, often employers are looking for people who are going deep, that more kind of T-shaped designer, if you're familiar with the framework, rather than those who are kind of like shallow and wide. So I wouldn't worry about going deep into a particular area on your portfolio. I do hear from designers who are worried that they're going too deep, like, should I be showing more versatility and like diversity of my skills? But I actually think that having a strong skill and going deep is a differentiator, to be honest, because I do see a lot of portfolios and bodies of work these days that are more kind of breadth oriented rather than depth focused. So yeah, I think like it's totally fine to explore different things, try different areas. Eventually, though, I do think it is worth kind of honing down on a skill or an area.
Yeah, definitely agree. I also hear that T-shaped designer term thrown around in a lot of design clubhouse rooms or like hiring managers, but I understand like early in your career, it's good to like explore different things. And
totally.
Yeah, that's still kind of like me. I'm a new grad from undergrad, so I have a place on my portfolio called the playground, where I just have like non-product design. I have my illustrations, anime art, food art stuff on there. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. I see that pretty common on portfolios is like, yeah, another page that's dedicated to like fun projects or like, complementary skills or whatever. And I think that that's totally fun and cool to see too.
Yeah, and let us know in the chat. Are you guys mostly product design, illustration? Would love to know each other, and feel free to connect with each other on the networking sheet too. We got a lot of great questions in the chat that were like highly upvoted. So I'm going to segue into our next top voted one. So oftentimes when like a good way to get experience without having a job or internship is to do side projects. And I guess this question kind of comes from, how do we take care of the lack of resources to do user research for individual projects to basically validate your side project with data to make it look like it's like a case study you can present on your portfolios during job interviews?
Yes. So I have been asked this a fair few times as well. So if user research is available to you, then I would embrace that and make that part of your process. Maybe you want to run some user research on your own. You could ask friends and family, or there are some websites, I believe, that you can also maybe pay a small amount to kind of send your user test or whatever out to people that fit a certain criteria. So I think there's ways that you can get a little bit creative if you want to bring user research into your side project. I've also seen people like share surveys or like links to their user tests in design communities, like in Slack design communities that I've been a part of, or maybe in Design Buddies. I don't know, maybe you have a room in there where you can kind of share a survey or something and get feedback from other people. So I think there's definitely ways to be creative and reach audiences to get some of that user research feedback. That said, I do think it is worth clarifying in your case study what you're trying to learn from the research. And this kind of is starting to get into the data piece and like tying it to data and metrics, because it is important to have some goals for your project, and maybe an idea about how you might measure those goals, or at least what you would consider success for a project. So I think it's important to clarify that up front so that you have that in mind when you're doing your user research. If you're in a case where you're not interested in user research, or you don't have access to it, or you can't do any user research, that's okay too. I feel like that's a pretty common scenario. I don't think that's like a total deal breaker and you shouldn't do your project. In that case, I think it's worth maybe talking about what you would do if you did have that resource available, or you could make assumptions based on what your familiarity with that that topic. Maybe you do some desk research, so just some Googling, reading some articles, things like that. That's also user research. Like user research doesn't always have to be interviews or surveys. You could do your own kind of competitive research. That also counts. And very lastly is that you could set your own constraints. If you cannot do any user research, you could make your own assumptions and constraints for your project, and just kind of be clear in why you've set those and what the intention of setting those are. So yeah, a few different ideas I think I talked about there. But I would encourage people to be creative in running your own user research if you can.
Yeah, definitely agree to that. Another place where I found useful was Facebook groups. So just an example,
Yeah.
I think Nabil was also in this, but the UX Wizards Design Challenge, it was like designing a meal subscription app for like elderly folks. So I just like searched 60 plus, and there's literally Facebook groups for everything. You just drop surveys in. So another great resource for that as well.
Yeah, totally.
And defining your own constraints. And yeah, that's how I met Nabil as well. Sorry, it's Nevi's in the Discord, so I get a little confused sometimes. Yeah, cool. Kind of still on the topic of like side projects and design and like kind of documentation, like priming side projects for recruiting purposes. So another two top questions in the Slido was, how would you what were the differences between how would you basically document your side projects? Like, would you have a notion of all your design artifacts and then kind of string them into a case study? And how does working on the side projects differ from working on your full-time work at Uber, if you're allowed to share if it's like non-NDA?
Yeah. So I have not written case studies for my side projects. I think if I had a side project that was like an app that I designed or something, or like was a design artifact, I probably would turn that into a case study. For my content related side projects, I haven't written case studies for them. However, they are linked on my website. I think if you go to my website, femke.design /about. I believe on that URL, there is a section where I have all of my kind of side projects, and I have like links to them and kind of a little bit of a light description about what each project is. But that's kind of the extent of it. I haven't really turned them into case studies, sorry. And I think what was the second part of the question about how that relates to my Uber work? Was that right?
Yeah, how would documenting your side projects go? Like, do you have like a Notion where you have all the notes and you just compile them all, or like basically
Right.
how you like organize everything?
Yeah. So I guess that's getting a little bit into like task management and organization. And I saw in the chat some people already talking about Notion and Trello. So maybe this is a topic people really like. I use a tool called Taskade to kind of like manage my side projects. I have a couple of freelancers that I work with. So having a tool that I can like assign tasks to the freelancers and kind of add due dates and, add any relevant content and link to things is really life-saving. I used to do it all via email and that just got out of control. So Taskade has been really great for me to kind of prepare and plan out like kind of to-do lists and tasks that are related to my side projects.
Yeah, and I see Trello as well. And the thing in Notion, they have a Kanban board as well. So like a little bit of Trello features, not everything, but it's free. And if you have a student plan, it's also free. And yeah, just have a student email. I mean, I still have mine, so it's free for me, even though I'm not technically a full-time student anymore. And yeah, lots of great questions. I'm trying to choose a few that logically makes sense. So Design Buddies has mostly students and interns, and it can be kind of one thing that I've also noticed in Design Buddies is that a lot of students are really, really interested in doing side projects, but they feel stressed out with school and just like balancing everything. So what are your tips on just like staying motivated? Do you like find side projects when you really like and like kind of not be afraid to like drop projects that don't work out? But how do you like find the inspiration and energy to continue?
Yeah, I think my advice here would be to think about areas in your life that you're already kind of doing or already thinking about and see if there's opportunity to turn that into a side project. So rather than like adding something new to your plate, it's kind of like, oh, how is what I'm already doing how could that be a side project? Like, is there a learning or an opportunity here? And if you're a student, maybe it's like, how can I document my journey as a student? And kind of maybe like create a journal and like make that a public link so other people can read about my experience as a student. Again, that's kind of how the podcast started, where Charlie and I were already having these conversations. So it was just a matter of pressing record next time we talked, rather than thinking like, let's start a podcast. I want to do a side project. So kind of, look at the things you're already doing. And if there's opportunity there to, turn something into a side project, that way you're not like adding to your plate, but you're kind of like strategically leveraging what you're already doing into a potential side project opportunity.
Yeah, I really like that. That's kind of how I created Design Buddies. Like my professors told me I shouldn't do design. I actually study engineering.
That's right. I read that about you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I created Design Buddies because I want to find people in design to connect with, just to like learn more about design and make friends in design and stuff. So I did something that I was already doing. So I like that, just like kind of bouncing off. Yeah. Instead of like creating something completely new.
Totally. Those are the most successful side projects I've seen, is ones that like come from a need. And I think why the podcast has been going for so long, because at its core, it's just me and Charlie catching up and chatting about our careers. It's not a podcast from day one. The podcast kind of came after we saw that like there was a need and an opportunity for us to share those stories publicly. And so, yeah, I think like, if you can think about things and areas in your life where there could be opportunity there, could lead to you having a more successful side project over time.
Yeah, definitely agree. And this kind of segues into a couple of questions that were submitted on Luma and on Slido. Is a lot of times, a lot of companies like to look at your experiences working with a team, but sometimes you don't really know anyone who want to collaborate with. So how did you meet Charlie, and how did you guys know you want to do like a podcast together? And what are some like things you would look for on a teammate when you work on side projects with?
Yeah, so Charlie and I met, I believe, through Twitter. And then we were actually like coincidentally working at the same company. For context, I'm actually born and raised in New Zealand, which, if you've been wondering this whole time where my weird accent is from, that's the culprit. And New Zealand's a pretty small place. There's only a few tech companies, and we were both happened to work at the same tech company. And that's kind of eventually how we met, through Twitter and working at this company. So I think, to answer the question, I guess, like, look within your existing communities that you're already a part of. I've heard people talk about like, they have a side project and they want to collaborate with someone, and then they kind of like actively go and try and find someone to fit that gap that they have. But I found the more organic and authentic side projects come about from two people who connect. Like, you already kind of have a relationship outside of the side project. You have similar motivations maybe, or a similar goal. Maybe you have different perspectives on something that can also be really interesting and add flavor to a side project. So I think it kind of comes, from my experience, more from the relationship you have with that person, rather than the side project first and then trying to find someone to fulfill that gap, that collaborative gap. So I think by being part of communities like Design Buddies, that's a really great place to create those relationships. I've definitely made a lot of friends and connections through design communities, whether it's like on Slack or Discord or Twitter, where I'm pretty active. And I focus on relationship first, and then side project ideas or collaboration ideas come afterwards. And sometimes the timeline of that can be really long. Like, I might form a relationship with someone on Twitter, and then it's not until like 2-3 years later that we, start collaborating on something. And so sometimes good things can take time as well. And relationships can definitely take a long time to build online, when you're not having that face-to-face communication or time together. So yeah, I think being in those communities and spaces where maybe like-minded people are hanging out, you might just be a bit more observant and see if there's someone interesting to connect with. You can build that relationship over time.
Yeah, definitely agree. How I started Design Buddies was like I randomly posted in another group. I posted this Facebook group called Asian Creative Network. I think that's also where I met Nadia, who is on our admin team. And
Oh,
that's where our first 200 members in Design Buddies joined. I literally post out a post is like, does anybody want to create like a wholesome design chat? And 200 people like over 200 people commented. So that 200 people became the first 200 people in Design Buddies. Definitely shout out to
amazing.
ACN. The staff and founders are amazing. Asian Creative Network on Facebook, so check them out. But yeah, look within your network. Joining communities is definitely where you find people to connect with who share the same interests as you do.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So I find like it's always good to kind of be observant and be um engaged in these kinds of communities. I find that a lot of people kind of sit on the sidelines or kind of take a back seat, and like that's fine too. Sometimes I do that when I'm overwhelmed or busy, but I think there's a lot of value too, especially early on in your career, from being engaged and collaborating with people within communities. So keep an eye out for those opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. Joining community is also a great way to just talk about design and learning a lot of things that's going on and design trends and new technologies and access to all
Yeah.
these resources and asking questions and just finding people to survive with about your common interests.
Yeah, I do feel like sometimes I worry that people are like overwhelmed by the amount of communities and like the idea that maybe they have to be online all the time and this fear of missing out and like keeping up with all of the conversations happening within a community. I've definitely felt that before. So I think I just want to reiterate, like, it's okay. You don't have to be online 24/7. Don't put that pressure on yourself. So I just like dip in and out when I have time, some headspace. So don't feel like you need to be there online engaging 24/7, because that's not healthy either.
Yeah, definitely plus one. It's all about balance. I know I see some of these comments in design buddies, how people feel like chat's going so fast they miss out, but there's always future
Mm-hmm.
opportunities. There's no shortage of opportunities out there. So don't be afraid of missing out. It's more important to live a balanced life. Make sure you sleep, work out, eat, do all these things. Keep yourself healthy because without health, you don't have anything else. So don't stress
Totally.
out about missing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found like what works for me, and I think everyone maybe is different here, but what works for me is like um quality over quantity. So like less communities, but going really deep and being really engaged and active. I think if you go and sign up for 20 design communities, like maybe that works for some people. For me, definitely not. I think that would be a full-time job checking all of those communities all of the time. So, find the one or two that you feel you can be your authentic self. You feel like there's the possibility to create really strong connections, that is fun, you enjoy, it's a safe space. Hopefully Design Buddies is that place for the people on this call. But yeah, find your tribe, so to speak. And, that's a good place to kind of put all your energy into.
Yeah, definitely. I know design buddies is huge. This is like a feedback that we've got really often that sometimes people feel afraid. That's why I try to create these small like
Mm,
interest channels and little clubs you guys can join. So hopefully you can take advantage of that as well. And another question that kind of came up in Luma and in the Slido is kind of building in public and utilizing Twitter and like how design Twitter works. Because I'm relatively new to Twitter. I started using it actively
yeah.
like later last year. So how would
Oh
you
my
utilize
gosh.
Twitter
Late
and
bloomer.
like
Yeah.
experience with it?
I must be so old. I think I recently got my like you've been on Twitter for 10 years little like celebration. So that makes me pretty old, I think. But yeah, I think like whether it's Twitter, Dribble, Facebook, Instagram, like it doesn't really matter the platform. I think just like kind of to what I alluded earlier, like just find your people and your tribe, and like kind of go all in there. For me, that has really been Twitter, where I've really been able to connect with people, have like conversations. It's led to some really cool opportunities for me throughout my career. And like maybe Twitter just isn't for you. It's not your thing. That's totally fine. It doesn't mean you're never going to get a good opportunity or you're not going to be a great designer. Maybe that place for you is Discord or Instagram or wherever. So I do think it is worth being active somewhere. That platform, I think, is kind of up to you. So that's kind of what's worked for me over time, I guess, is kind of listening to like which platform I feel most comfortable in and can best contribute towards. And for me, that's been Twitter.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like your tweets too. I'm
Oh,
still
thank you.
learning. I'm still learning how to Twitter. I feel like the character limit is so restricting. So sometimes I'll like write something on
Yeah.
LinkedIn and just like link it in there.
Yeah. I'm kind of like at a point on Twitter where I feel like because I think I have like a little over 20,000 followers. So I kind of feel this pressure of like all of my tweets need to be like quality content. But sometimes I just want to tweet about like something so random and like off topic. But I get the pressure that I have to like be tweeting quality content. So I've been like writing and then like draft, like saving my tweets as draft instead of actually tweeting them. But I'm trying to like overcome that because I don't want Twitter for me to just be a place where it's like only design and then I'm like some design influencer. And to me, like authenticity is about like not just being that like influencer or career person. I also want to talk about my personal life when I want to. That to me is being authentic and showing who I am outside of work and outside of design, because design doesn't define me as a person. Like I don't call myself a designer like outside of work. So yeah, that's something I'm still like kind of struggling with, is that balance of like personal private on some of these platforms when I have such a large audience and a large following.
Yeah, I definitely struggle with that as well. Cause like on LinkedIn, sometimes I just want to talk about like anime or like running or like something that's like
Right.
not design related, but also related to
Yeah.
myself. So definitely
Yeah.
feel that struggle as well.
Yeah, it's hard because I feel like a lot of the advice I got early on, and granted, it was good advice because it got me to where I am today, is kind of like, um, you know, I always heard the phrase that like people will put you in a box. And so you have the opportunity to control which box they put you in, right? And so at the time when I was like early on in my career, I was like, I want to be in the design box. Like I want people to see me as a designer. And so I like actively and like consciously created a lot of content around that, talked a lot about design. Like all of my tweets were about design because that's what I wanted to be. And that's like who I wanted people to see me as. Now that I'm in that box, I'm like, okay, this box is like pretty good. Like I'm getting some good opportunities by being in this box, but I don't want to be restricted to this box. I want to be able to be like Femke, the person who like also really likes hiking and camping and like nature's in the outdoors. So I think that's where I'm at, is like trying to figure out how to slide into other boxes now and then.
Yeah, or you can create your own box.
Yeah. Sorry if that was like a really bad metaphor, but that's kind of how I've thought about it over time.
Yeah, I also struggle with that too. Like I wanted at first when I was starting my career, I wanted to be known as a designer because that's what I was trying to work towards. But once I made it in, I was like, I don't only just want to do design, I want to do like community building and other things like that too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely struggle a lot with that. A lot of times like as a content creator, people tell me, or like I watch a lot of tutorials on like how to grow more followers or how to like be a successful content creator. And they're always like, follow your niche. But then sometimes you want to talk about something completely different. And it's just a balance of like having your niche and
Yeah.
expressing yourself too.
Yeah, because there's definitely a benefit to having that niche, right? Like without it, then people are going to put you in a box, and like you don't know what box they're going to put you in, and it might not be the designer box or the box that you want them to that you want to be in. So there is definitely benefit of like niching down and like promoting yourself as X. I mean, that's what I did a lot of early on in my career and got me to where I am today. So there is benefits to that.
Yeah, it's all about branding yourself and how you stand out
Yeah,
amongst
personal
everybody.
branding. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a hot topic too. I see a lot of people talking about.
Yeah, I've done a few presentations on that as well. But personal branding is super, super important. Applying like branding principles to yourself and your personality.
Yeah.
And speaking of personal branding, I know that's a great way to stand out. I see a lot of people here on Zoom that is also interested in starting out content creation. So how would you recommend like making your first tweet or like making your first Instagram post and just like getting over that fear of or like thinking
Yeah.
of like what to post exactly as like if you want to brand yourself as a designer?
Yeah. So this is in the context of personal branding or like starting a side project.
Personal branding as a designer.
Okay. Yeah, personal branding as a designer. Yeah. So I feel like a lot of the time when we talk about personal branding, people immediately jump to like visual personal branding. So like, do I need a logo? What are the colors that I'm going to use? Like, what's my typeface on my website? Like, how am I going to visually brand my presence online? And while that stuff is relevant. I don't know if it's the most important thing when it comes to personal branding. I only got a logo for myself a year ago, and I've been creating side projects for like 6 years at this point. So like for me, my personal brand started more in terms of like the content I created, how I talked about that content, the authenticity that I brought to the table. So that's been my approach over the years, is more thinking about my personal brand in terms of values. What do I want to be known for? What do I stand for? What do I not stand for? What are my beliefs within design? How do I want to give back to the design community? Like, what kind of designer do I want to be? That for me has been more like, that's how I think about personal branding. And I feel like the visual part of that, of like the logo and the colors and whatever, like that comes later. Once you've kind of figured out who you are and how you want to present yourself as a designer, you know, you can follow up with like the visual part of your personal brand. So I worry that I didn't really answer the question, because I know you were talking about like creating that first post and like, you know, starting on a social media platform. But I think like it does start in how you present yourself, not necessarily just visually, but how you talk and how you engage with people. That over time leads up to your personal brand. And then, yeah, the visual part of that I think can come later.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. Like the top question is like, how should I like make a logo as a designer? How do I like
Right.
pick the colors? And
Yeah.
I feel like personal brand is all about how you make people feel and what do people say about you when you walk out of the room.
Yes. Yes. That's a really good one. What do people say about you when you walk out of the room? Yeah. Think about that and reflect on that. What's the kind of lasting impression that you want to leave? I love that.
Yeah, and I still don't have a logo. My one on my website, just like random one, just now has something there so people
Yeah.
can click on to go to home.
Yeah,
But
it's
I
not
was
the most
still gonna,
important thing, honestly. Yeah, it is not the most important thing. Your Instagram feed does not have to be this perfectly polished, curated, you know, branded feed. I only started my Instagram account in September. I've had a personal Instagram account for many, many years, but my design one I only started in September of last year. So again, like that stuff for me has come a lot later. I focused more on the authenticity in the beginning.
yeah, I like that. Just really just expressing yourself because at the end of the day, like I feel like for me, my kind of struggle with social media is like I see people like on LinkedIn, like I'm excited to announce that I got this job. And like I was like transitioning from engineering, I was like, I feel like a small potato. And I feel like just like expressing yourself and talking about your struggles, your lessons learned helps people out instead of like showing off and like flexing and stuff.
Yeah, I feel like your time is much better spent like building those relationships with people, engaging with the community, honing your skills and your craft through a side project, than creating a logo for yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Like don't stress out about creating a logo. Don't stress out about like matching the visual style of your resume and your website, even though like I feel like a lot of people I go to like a lot of like networking. No, I used to go to a lot of like career workshops and always like for design, they always say like match your portfolio with your resume. But I feel like that's like that can be stressful because there's like a lot you can consider because it's you're expressing yourself. So I would
Yeah.
just recommend focusing on yourself and instead and letting the visuals and your typeface match yourself instead of like thinking about how like what which one should I choose first.
I have reviewed hundreds of job applications and I've never once paid attention to whether the resume matches the portfolio, for what it's worth.
Yeah, that's a good call because I feel like that's something that used to stress me out earlier.
Never pay attention to it. I just look at the content on the resume and on the portfolio.
Yeah, but then again, some hiring managers do, so I guess it really depends. But I think
That's
most
fair.
like I think most from what I personally know don't really care. As long as you have all the content experience and you're able to showcase your personality, how you think through design decisions during an interview, I feel like that's the
Yeah,
most important part.
totally.
Yeah. So kind of going, we have like 9 minutes left, but I just want to touch on some more questions that are submitted live on Slido.
Yep.
Is that how would you deal with like some people call like moonlighting and well, like let's just say you are working full time as an intern, but you're also like a product designer, but you're also curious about kind of going in that design influencer space. And
Mm-hmm.
how would you deal with a manager that's like not really supportive? Because I've seen some YouTubers, they struggled a lot because and they literally quit their job at these like top tech companies because
Yeah.
their company was not supportive of them. So how would you
Yes.
advocate for yourself, for your interests in these kind of settings?
Yes, this is really difficult. Really difficult. And I think it depends on your priorities. If you are fortunate and privileged enough to be in a position where you can walk away from the job in favor of your side project, that's awesome. If you can do that and you want to do that, do that. Not everybody is in that position, obviously. And at the end of the day, for most people, I would say, like, the job comes first, right? Like, we all need to pay our bills. We all need an income. We need the experience from the job. So I don't want to sit here and say, like, quit your job or like tell your employer to buzz off, because most of us are not in that position, to be honest, to be frank. So I think in that case, definitely have the conversation with your manager. Try to understand what their hesitations are, what's holding them back. Maybe it's a company policy. If that's true, that can be really difficult to change and to influence. So you might just have to work around that, and think about what you can do. If there is anything you can still do that would meet the company policy guidelines. If it is more personal to the manager, maybe they're not comfortable with it or they're worried about it, then definitely have a conversation with them to try and understand where that's coming from, and see if you can meet them in the middle, and try to kind of qualm their concerns. It's always good to kind of hear what concerns they do have, because sometimes they might be relevant. Other times you might be able to kind of put them at ease straight away pretty easily. But yeah, there is no real easy answer to this conundrum, unfortunately. I find that for me, I guess I've been in a kind of lucky position where I started some of my side projects before the job. So I could be really upfront when I joined Uber that here are the side projects I have, like, that's the package deal. If you want me, I come with the side projects, But if it's something that you're starting while you're employed at a current place and it comes up as kind of, something that could not be going down well, that's a little bit more trickier to navigate, I feel. So case by case basis, it's really hard to give like a concrete piece of advice here on what you should do.
Yeah, definitely. I also struggle. I also kind of thought a lot about this. And the reason why I decided to sign on full time at EA is because my team was supportive with design buddies. And I see a few of them in here too. And I see them done talks with design buddies, and I just feel supported. And that's why. But I also had places where I also had instances where I had to look in like conflict of interest and just like making sure I talked to HR and thinking of that. And one way I kind of like indirectly kind of influenced that, what kind of like moved towards that direction where they're okay with it, is I would share my learnings a lot of side projects on LinkedIn, and in return it would kind of make the company look good, because they see the employees is really happy. So I guess that's another argument you can give for doing side projects.
Yeah, totally. And like, I still do this. Like, if I want to take time out of my job to like go to a conference, or I went to like a design retreat a few years ago, my manager was like, sure, but we'd love for you to come back and share your learnings with the team. Like, how can you like bring something back from that experience that will benefit the company? So that's always a good one. I also just remembered a little story that I want to share, where in the past I was, trying to find a new job, and one of the employers that I got an offer for, they had a clause in the contract that any income that I earned from side projects would have to be donated to charity. I have nothing against charity. I love charity. I support charities, but I felt like that was a decision for me to make and not the company. And so I was kind of in a position at that stage where I walked away from that offer because of that one clause, because I didn't want my employer to have control over my side income. I felt like that wasn't really their business. So I think kind of comes to you as well, of like, how strongly do you value your side projects and potential side income if you're making any? How important is that to you? Is it something that you're willing to walk away from, or something that you're willing to give up a little bit of control for? For me, my boundary is no, like, I'm not willing to give up control of those for an employer. But that's something that I think, over time you need to think about how you value that yourself.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. And definitely be really careful on asking these questions as well to HR, because you don't want them come knocking on your door and saying that, hey, you can't do this.
Yeah.
Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've also found a little bit over time, just to kind of wrap up that last piece. As I've gotten like comfortable at Uber, I've been working there 4 years now. I've gotten a bit more comfortable, kind of like pushing the boundaries sometimes of what I can do with regards to side projects and what I can and can't share. So I think also just keep that in mind, like as you grow tenure and experience at a place, you might kind of inherently be granted a little bit more wiggle room as to what you can and can't share outside of the workplace.
Oh, that's good to know. Definitely, I'll definitely keep
For what
that
it's
in
worth.
mind. Yeah, cool. I know we're at like 1 more minute left. So we got a lot of great questions in the chat too on slide. Unfortunately, we can't get to every single one of them, but I really want to ask this one that was also submitted on Luma is what would it be like one or a few pieces of advice you would give to your younger self or anybody aspiring to be where you are today?
Yeah, so I know that you were going to ask me this question, and I tried to think of a really good answer, but like there's so much that it's hard to kind of distill it into one piece of advice. I think like with what I've seen people getting like really stressed out and kind of overwhelmed with lately, which is kind of this like, how do you stand out? How do you differentiate yourself? Like there's so much competition in design now and so much, supply of designers, all these boot camps and everything. And so I think my advice, if you're kind of in that situation and feeling those emotions, is like to just don't worry and kind of, again, I think we've talked a lot about authenticity in the last hour, and I would kind of like bring that up as my last piece of advice is to like lean into your authentic self, because that's what's going to help differentiate you and stand you out from all of the hundreds of other designers that are applying for that same role. And don't be afraid to let that shine through in your portfolio. I feel like I see a lot of portfolios that it's like, cool, another designer, another case study. Anything you can do to talk about your authentic self and bring in whatever differentiates you, whether it's your personal values, your design principles, share that on your portfolio. That's really interesting for me to see as somebody looking for a teammate, is what makes you you and what's authentic about you as a designer.
Definitely +1. Your vibe attract your tribe. So express yourself and people will come to you.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. It's time for a group photo. So give it a few seconds for everyone to turn on their camera. And so you can see everybody on screen. And we'll be doing a group photo in a way for our Instagram story.
Yay.
Yeah, make sure to connect with Femke and Design Buddies, all the links, and Femke also has a job board. So definitely check that out. That's new. And all the links are in the chat. Check out her YouTube and her podcast. Really love the portfolio, the case study Figma files and the dev handoff Figma files.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You have 7 pages. So just keep smiling. So we're going to do a smile one and then we'll do a wave one for Instagram story. I love the baby Yoda, by the way. And you can bring in any stuffed animal you want. This is my little buddy, Rilakuma.
So
Always bring on
cute.
group photos.
I feel like I missed a memo to like get some cute little.
Oh,
little
no worries. I always just say that at the end. But yeah. We can do the group photo. So just keep smiling until I say we can wave because there's 7 pages. All right. 1, 2, 3, cheese.
Cheese. Oh my gosh, doggos. Love it, Bobby.
Yeah, I love all your pets and your stuffed animals. All right, stay smiling. I'm gonna get all the pages.
And Hannah's plant. That's great. Plant game.
Yeah, I love plants. Photosynthesis. Great. Taking all the photos. All right, we're gonna do a wave for Instagram story. So you can see all of them in the highlights as well. But this is what we do just for fun. All right. Got so many notifications. Anyways. All right, my phone's loading. All right. Ready, set. I'm gonna try to show everybody. So hang on, something on Zoom. Let me try to show everyone. All right, ready, set. All right, I opened everyone. All right, ready, set, go. Hello, buddies. Thank you all for coming to using side projects to level up in your career as a designer with Femke. Thank you all for tuning in today. You can find a recording on our YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody. All right, thank you. And so I'm going to stop streaming to YouTube, but thank you all so much for coming today.
Thank you so much. It was great to connect with you all. And if you have questions that I didn't get to or didn't answer, feel free to tweet me, Instagram DM. Happy to carry on the conversation.
Yeah. Definitely check out Femke's the podcast Design Life and YouTube channel too. So I'm going to stop streaming on YouTube. Bye.